I don't know what we're comparing to, but I like it. Oh, well, there's that. All right. Ezekiel chapter 40 is where we're headed this morning. If you need a Bible, there's some on the on the chairs in front of you. If you borrow a Bible, it's on page 727. I can help get you there more quickly. As Pastor Amaldi said at the end of the message, I'm going to ask you, what is one thing you heard today that you want to apply to your life this week? It's a takeaway. It's something that you can live out. It's something you can do. It's an action item. Something you heard this morning you want to apply to your life this week. Kids, as always, you've got 5 questions in your handout. On 8 worksheets you can turn in. You get a prize for doing 8. For the rest of us, as we open up the text this morning, the rest of Ezekiel, chapter 40 through 48, is one big vision. So we're going to break it up into 5 different parts. We're going to get through most of part 1 today, enough of part 1 to say we did it. We're going to go through these 5 parts, getting us from here to the end. If you want to, if you've got a Bible with you, if you want to kind of put your finger in Ezekiel 8, I'm going to go back there in just a minute. If you're scrolling, you can scroll backwards. But I want to look at how what we begin today really started in the beginning of the book. You with me? So we're in 40. We're going to look at 8. We're in a big vision. We're going to do part 1 this morning. Here's the main idea. Ezekiel 40 through 42 is about restoring holiness. God restores his presence by rebuilding a holy people who approach him with reverence, order, purity, and hope that is ultimately fulfilled in Christ. God restores his presence by rebuilding a holy people who approach him with reverence, order, purity, and hope, ultimately is fulfilled in Christ. Ezekiel chapter 40, verse 1. In the 25th year of our exile, at the beginning of the year, on the 10th day of the month, in the 14th year, after the city was struck down, on that very day, the hand of the Lord was upon me, and he brought me to the city. In visions of God, he brought me to the land of Israel, and he set me down on a very high mountain on which was a structure like a city to the south. We're going to read a lot today, so you'll be in your Bible a lot, so stay with me, if you will. But this is our starting point. So God gives Ezekiel a new vision. Again, it's 9 chapters long, 40 through 48, big vision. It begins with the exiles in Babylon, and God is bringing them hope. He notes that this begins after the destruction of the city, which included the destruction of the temple. So how did we get here? Right? If you're brand new to Ezekiel, you're showing up, you're a guest here today, how did we get here? The opening parts of the books tell us about how God's people have been disobeying him literally for hundreds of years. And he sent prophet after prophet to generation after generation of disobedience. And he keeps warning them, listen, if you don't do this, I'm going to exile. I'm going to remove you from your land. I'm going to exile you. I'm going to put you out under another nation. You'll be slaves to the nations around you until you repent. They don't listen. And they don't listen, and they don't listen, and they don't listen, and they don't listen. And God does one thing after another. First, he conquers Israel. Israel is conquered by Assyria and scattered throughout the nations. Then Judah is conquered mostly except for the city of Jerusalem, and most of Judah is exiled. In fact, these particular exiles, including Ezekiel the prophet, are in an area called Kabar in Babylon. They were part of that first wave of exile, and they're now agricultural servants or slaves to Babylon. So God is writing to these exiles who have lost everything. In fact, after they went into exile, several years go by, and then Babylon returns, conquers Jerusalem, destroys the temple. Now, the temple was the place where God's presence existed with them. And as they got disobedient, God's presence left. And it gets worse before it gets better. We'll see some of that in a minute. But then in the loss of the temple, they feel like they've lost everything. They've lost their capital, Jerusalem. They've lost all their land. And they've lost their place of worship for God. Verse 3. Ezekiel says, when he brought me there, behold, there was a man whose appearance was like bronze, with a linen cord and a measuring reed in his hand. And he was standing in the gateway. All right, kids, I'm going to answer your first question here. Who is the man with the linen cord and the measuring reed, and what are those things for? And the answer is he's an angelic figure. When Ezekiel sees this angelic messenger in this vision who's going to lead him through this vision. The image like bronze is similar to other visions of angels. In fact, we'll see that in just a second. The linen cord and the measuring reed are both measuring instruments. Think of like a long cord of a certain length that you could use to kind of measure out things, and a reed, kind of like a yardstick. This reed, except it's much bigger. And these are measuring tools. He's standing in the gateway, which brings us to the temple. So he's standing outside of it, leading Ezekiel in this vision to this place. Now, again, this is about restoring what God has taken away. Right? This is what they lost already, and God is inviting them back. And so now, after literally hundreds of years, and then after many years, probably about 50 at this point, years of being exiled, they probably lost an entire generation in exile, God is finally seeing the repentance in these people, and he's inviting them back, and he's started to make promises. He'll bring them a new shepherd. He'll restore them to the land. He'll give them a new heart. He'll raise them up from dry bones in a valley. He will conquer all their enemies. And now he's giving this vision about restoring a temple. Now there's something important about this, and I'll say this a couple times. Today isn't about the temple as much as it is a vision of the temple. Here's what I mean by that. This isn't blueprints to rebuild the temple that's been destroyed. This is a vision about a temple. There's a difference. When Ezra goes back in another 100 years after this, and I'm rounding up, when he goes back and returns, he doesn't build according to these measurements. Today's a vision. It's not supposed to be taken literally. Like every vision we've had, the valley of dry bones, the new heart, all these things, the visions have meaning. They have symbolism that are to convey a message. We'll see that in a minute. What I don't want you to hear is blueprints. There's a different thing going on here. But turn back to Ezekiel 8. I'm going to read through most of this chapter, and I want to just kind of catch us up. So early in the book, many, many years earlier, God begins to speak to Ezekiel. He calls him to be a prophet. He tells him to speak to the exiles, the people in his community. So he begins to speak and bring messages from God to the people. First, of the judgment of Jerusalem when it's going to be destroyed. He says that long before it happens. God says this long before it happens. Then when it's destroyed, and now God is starting, he's on the other side of destruction. In fact, our chapter opened up with 14 years after that. Now God is talking about returning them to the land and restoring them. So here's Ezekiel 8. Here's before the temple was destroyed. It says, in the 6th year, in the 6th month, on the 5th day of the month, I sat in my house with the elders of Judah sitting before me. The hand of the Lord fell upon me there. Then I looked, and behold, a form that had the appearance of a man. Below what appeared to be his waist was fire, and above his waist was something like the appearance of brightness, like a gleaming metal. Sound familiar? Right? We just had a guy who looks like bronze. Right? It's a very similar vision of an angel. He put out the form of a hand, which took me about a lock of my head. And the Spirit lifted me up between earth and heaven and brought me in visions to the God of God to Jerusalem, to the entrance of the gateway of the inner court that faces north, where was the seat of the image of jealousy which provokes to jealousy. So here's what God is saying. Back in Ezekiel 8, God has taken Ezekiel, he's brought him back to the city. Again, this is before the city is destroyed, before the temple is destroyed. He brings him in the city, and he sets him outside the gate of the temple. And right outside the gate of the temple is a gigantic idol statue of a foreign idol, right? That the people of God who should be worshiping God actually have these other idols. Let's keep reading. Behold, the glory of God of Israel was there, like the vision that I saw in the valley. Then he said to me, Son of man, lift up your eyes toward the north. So I lifted up my eyes toward the north, and behold, north of the altar gate in the entrance was this image of jealousy, another idol. And he said to me, Son of man, do you see what they're doing? The great abominations that the house of Israel are committing here to drive me far from my sanctuary. But you will still see greater abominations. Here's what God tells Ezekiel. You see how they're worshiping foreign gods. You see how they're worshiping false idols, and they're doing it at my temple. He says, but wait, buckle up. It's going to get worse. Verse 7, and he brought me to the entrance of the court, and when I looked, behold, there was a hole in the wall. Then he said to me, Son of man, dig in the wall. So I dug in the wall, and behold, there was an entrance. And he said to me, go in and see the vile abominations they're committing here. So I went in and saw, and there, engraved on the wall all around, was every form of creeping thing and loathsome beast and all the idols of the house of Israel. So Ezekiel sees inside the walls now, as he's moving closer through the walls of the temple, through the outer court, and he's moving in, and he's seeing more and more idols. These creeping, crawling things and beasts are probably holdovers from the idols of Egypt that they've kind of taken on too. He says, look, and they're everywhere. And before them, verse 11, stood 70 men of the elders of the house of Israel, and Jazaniah the son of Shaphat, standing among them. Each had a censer in his hand, which is kind of a representation of prayer. And the smoke of the cloud of incense went up. And he said to me, Son of man, see what the elders of the house of Israel are doing in the dark, each in his room of pictures, some more idols. For they say, the Lord does not see us, the Lord has forsaken the land. He said also to me, you will see still greater abominations that they commit. From the elders on down, there's idol worship inside of God's temple, right? Inside the temple where God's presence used to exist, they're worshiping false gods. They're worshiping false idols. Verse 14, then he brought me to the entrance of the north gate of the house of the Lord. And behold, there sat women weeping for Tammuz. Then he said to me, have you seen this, O son of man? You will still see greater abominations than these. So the women are worshiping idols also, this foreign deity Tammuz. Verse 16, and he brought me to the inner court of the house of the Lord. So you're going from the city, inside the city, to the walls of the outer court that let you into the temple area kind of improper. And they see more idols. And then to the inner wall where you're going into the temple proper. And as he keeps moving in, there's more and more idolatry. Verse 16, and he brought me to the inner court of the house of the Lord. And behold, at the entrance of the temple of the Lord, between the porch and the altar, were about 25 men with their backs to the temple of the Lord, and their faces toward the east, worshiping the sun toward the east. We've gotten now to the porch right before the inner part of the temple. And they've got their backs to where you would worship God, and they're literally worshiping the sun. Skip down to verse 18. Therefore, I will act in my wrath, my eye will not spare, nor will I have pity. And though they cry in my ears with a loud voice, I will not hear them. So God commits to destroying the temple because his people have profaned the temple. Right? Because they brought other forms of worship in. The very thing God said, right? In the Ten Commandments, like, you shall have no other gods. You shall make no graven images, no idols, right? You'll keep my name holy. They've lost all this. Add the Sabbath, and you've missed all four of the first table of the law. So the people who are supposed to be God's people now are worshiping idols, all the way inside the temple of God. So he judges them by destroying the temple. So now we fast forward to where we are. The temple's been destroyed about 14 years earlier than Ezekiel receives this vision. And so as God gives a vision of a temple, he starts to bring hope to the people. Can you see how the loss of the temple might have left the exiles feeling like God would never return to them? Right? By allowing that temple to be destroyed, many of them have thought, God may never come back to us. Have you ever felt like this? Have you ever felt like God has left you? Like God has abandoned you, like God doesn't want to answer you. That's the setting for this vision today that Ezekiel is both receiving and giving to the exiles. So back in Ezekiel 40, let's pick up in verse 4. And the man said to me, so the angel begins to speak to Ezekiel, Son of man, look with your eyes and hear with your ears, and set your heart upon all that I shall show you. For you were brought here in order that I might show it to you. Declare all that you see to the house of Israel. 3 key phrases here. Look with your eyes, hear with your ears, set your heart upon all that I will show you. Right? Look with your eyes. That's a key to any vision. What do we see? Right? What we see, all the symbols, all the things inside. What do these things mean? Right? And again, this is just a vision. This isn't God saying to Ezekiel, here's the blueprints, go rebuild. God will do that with Ezra later, and it doesn't look like today. This is a vision. It's meant to be symbolic. It's meant to convey meaning. So look with your eyes, hear with your ears. There's going to be things that Ezekiel sees, and then there will be moments where the angel will speak, and he'll bring some other clarity. Sometimes what we see and what we hear partner together in weird ways. That's more true in the book of Revelation than it is in Ezekiel, but sometimes what we see and what we hear almost feel contradictory until we understand them. Then he says, set your heart upon, right? Set your heart upon all that I'll show you. What he's saying is, I'm going to show you something that has meaning. It's going to call you to act. This vision is calling the people to action. There's an expectation of action attached to this vision, meaning the vision is meant to call people to action, like our takeaways that we talk about. Our takeaways aren't just something we learned. Oh, this was a cool fact that I heard that I didn't know before. A takeaway is, what is something you heard today you want to apply to your life this week? What is the change you want to see God make in you? Same idea today. Verse 4 again, one more time. And the man said to me, Son of man, look with your eyes, hear with your ears, and set your heart upon all that I will show you, for you were brought here in order that I might show it to you. Declare all that you see to the house of Israel. God says, I want you to take this, or the angel tells him, Ezekiel, I want you to take this. I want you to take what you see, what you hear, right? I want you to set your heart upon it. I want you to feel the meaning of it. And I want you to take that back, and I want you to deliver it to the people who are trapped in exile, the people who probably feel like God has abandoned them. Where there's no temple, they wonder, will God ever return to our lives? Ezekiel, I want you to bring them some hope today. So here's point number 1 today. Hope from ruins. Our story is far from over. God infuses hope into our ruins. He has not forsaken us. He possesses the power to rebuild what sin and suffering have shattered. God brings hope to ruins. God has the ability to restore what sin and suffering have shattered. It might be your sin, might have been choices you made, it might have been sins against you. But all sin and suffering leaves our lives in ruins. God has the ability to restore that. God brings hope into ruins. Let's get into the details of the vision. It's going to get muddy before it probably gets clear, so let's work through it. Verse 5. And behold, there was a wall all around the outside of the temple area. And the length of the measuring reed in the man's hand was 6 long cubits, each being a cubit and a handbreadth in length. So he measured the thickness of the wall, 1 reed, and the height, 1 reed. So a city that is really a temple. So he has this vision from a mountain first, from the outside. He looks down at the edge of the mountain. What he sees looks like a city. It's actually a temple. And what we're going to see is, I want you to think of almost like concentric squares. Square one's giant. The outside. It's the wall that separates not God's space to God's space, right? Outside the temple to inside. But before we get inside the actual temple, you go to the outer courts through a series of walls and gates and stuff, all things we're going to see, to another set of gates and things that you go through to the inner courts. Through these things till you get to the temple proper, until you get inside where it's close to where God is, who is inside the Holy of Holies. All right? Imagine like when we come today, when you pull in off of Bloomfield or you come in off 183rd, however you got here. When you enter the property, you've entered our property, right? Not in the building yet, but you're on the property. You park, you get out, you get nearer. You go through a series of things. Maybe there's doors out here. There's doors here. You kind of go work your way in. The vision comes in concentric squares. What I want you to think is you kind of work your way in. So the outer wall separates the outside and the temple and the inside of the temple area. The outer court would be like the property, right? The inner court, of the holy place, kind of like our sanctuary. Then there's the Holy of Holies where only God can be. And there's a process between each thing. And again, this is a vision. It's not literal. Like Gog and Magog last week was a vision with a fictitious enemy that was supposed to say something, teach us something. Same thing today. Verse 5, and behold, there was a wall all around the outside of the temple area, and the length of the measuring reed in the man's hand was 6 long cubits, each being a cubit and a handbreadth in length. So he measured the thickness of the wall, 1 reed, and the height, 1 reed. Then he went into the gateway facing east, going up its steps, and measured the threshold of the gate 1 reed deep. So some measurements. A long cubit is 21 inches for us. A cubit's 18, a long cubit is 21. Don't ask, I don't know. 6 long cubits actually is 7 cubits. So don't ask why we didn't do it. I don't know, right? I didn't write it, I'm just reading it. So if you do the math, the outer wall is about 10.5 feet thick, 10.5 feet tall. This is a massive, massive wall. And the threshold of the gate, the depth of the entryway, is that same 10.5 feet deep. So I want you to imagine the separation between what is outside and what is inside. What God is communicating here with these massive walls is a separation between what is outside and what is inside his space. Verse 7. And the side rooms, 1 reed long, 1 reed broad, and the space between the side rooms 5 cubits, and the threshold of the gate by the vestibule at the gate of the inner end 1 reed. Then he measured the vestibule of the gateway on the inside 1 reed. Then he measured the vestibule of the gateway 8 cubits and its jambs, 2 cubits of the door jambs. And the vestibule of the gate was at the inner end. And there were 3 side rooms on either side of the east gate. There were 3 of the same size, and the jambs on either side were the same size. So imagine guard shacks all around the inside of these massive walls. So you go through these 10.5-foot thick walls through the east gate where we are right now. There's going to be a north and a south as well. You go through these things, and as you go through, there's almost there's a vestibule. There's more space. Kind of like when you come in these doors, there's this lobby area before you come in here. Like each set of walls and things have these additional spaces. It keeps elongating. And then inside these outer walls, on the inside of them are guard shacks, where the priests that have the job of guarding this are all around the outside. Now, just back up a minute in your brain to Ezekiel 8. You can probably figure out what they're guarding against, right? From all the idolatry and sin and things that were brought in there. And so we see this kind of layers of guard rooms. Let's keep reading. Verse 11, then he measured the width of the opening of the gateway, 10 cubits, and the length of the gateway, 13 cubits. That's like 17.5 feet tall by about 23 feet wide. These are huge, huge gates. There was a barrier, verse 12, before the side rooms, 1 cubit on either side, and the side rooms were 6 cubits on either side. Then he measured the gate from the ceiling, one side of the room, to the ceiling of the other, a breadth of 25 cubits. The openings faced each other. He measured also the vestibule, 60 cubits. And around the vestibule of the gateway was the court. So again, the vestibule is like these inner chambers beyond the gates, like more space inside there that you, as you transition from one layer to the next. Verse 15, from the front of the gate at the entrance to the front of the inner vestibule of the gate was 50 cubits. And the gateway had windows all the way around, narrowing inwards toward the side rooms, toward their jambs. And likewise, the vestibule had windows all around the inside, and on the jambs were palm trees. 4 important visuals. There's these massive outer walls making clear a distinct inside versus outside. There's huge gates, massive gates to allow people to enter. There's guard shacks all around the inside to protect and guard. And then there's these walkways that are narrowing as they go in. That narrowing is going to come up a few times. So what's so important about this outer wall that Ezekiel spends so much time describing it? What's inside of it is the walls and the gates. It's inside of it becomes God's space. And God is delineating, making clear what is not God's space and what is God's space. Even the outer courts, where people can gather, people can hang out, people can do things that are not necessarily just worship. That's not God's space, this is God's space. There's this clear marker of what is and what isn't. And what he's going to do is he's going to start calling people to understand the difference between outside and inside God's space. Verse 17, then he brought me into the outer court. Let's pause for a second. 16 verses spent on the massive way God wants to make a difference between who or what is outside and who or what is inside, right? Why so much separation? And again, there's this distinction and protection of what isn't in what is God's space. Verse 17, when they brought me to the outer court, and behold, there were chambers and a pavement all around the court. 30 chambers faced the pavement, and the pavement ran alongside the gates, corresponding to the length of the gates. This was the lower pavement. Then he measured the distance from the inner front of the lower gate to the outer front of the inner court, 100 cubits on the east side and on the north side. So we're seeing space between the outer court or the outer gates and the inner court's inner gates, right? So again, concentric squares. So on this side, as we come in through this gate, a lot of space, big wall, big gates, big vestibules on the other side, lots of chambers, lots of guard shacks all the way around. Then there's a lot of space. Then our next square, kind of that next inner layer, a concentric square. So there's this massive inside space, but inside, but not all the way in, right? There's going to be layers to this. So in light of all those details, I just want to pause for a second. I want you to think like this today. What do you do to prepare as you come to church? Right? Do you have anything that kind of sets you apart from you're not here to you are here? It was a rhetorical question. All right. But good answer. When we get here, do we act any different when we drive on the property? Still, again, a rhetorical question. When we get out and we head in, do we start to make a transition? Right? Do we start to transition ourselves from the world to God's space? Or do we prepare ourselves in ways to honor God? This is one of the things where I am so hard, and ask almost anyone, I'm so hard on people being here on time, right? Ready for what we're doing. Like, we should be here. We should be ready. We should be in our seats before the call to worship, right? So that we could lift up our voices and sing. Like, every piece that God puts into a service, right? And we get our services out of Scripture. Like, every piece that God puts in has purpose. Like, there's a wall, there's a gate, there's a vestibule, there's guards, there's things, right? And we're just scratching the surface. We're on the outer layer right now. Everything we do is meant to draw us in. So if you show up late and everything's started, you're out there getting coffee, and you're just you're missing pieces. Right? You're just not quite in yet. There's a difference when we start setting ourselves apart. So again, no shame. If it was you today, it happens every week. There's about a third of the church, so it's not just any one person, right? But this is a challenge. Do we treat this as God's space? Do we arrive here distinctly? Do we guard a difference between what's out there and what's in here? And do we come in with an expectation that God's presence is here? Verse 20, let's keep reading. As for the gate that faced the north, belonging to the outer court, he measured its length and its breadth. Its side rooms, 3 on either side, its jambs and its vestibule were the same size of those as the first gate. Its length was 50 cubits. Its breadth, 25 cubits. Its windows and its vestibules and its palm trees were the same size as those on the gate faced toward the east. And by 7 steps they would go up it and find its vestibule before them. And opposite the gate on the north, as on the east, was a gate to the inner court, and he measured from gate to gate 100 cubits. So north gate, just like the east gate. Come in, kind of a square space, same distance, same measurements, faces the inner court. So you go from the outside to the outer court, facing on the inner court, your gate to gate. Verse 24, and he led me toward the south, and behold, there was a gate on the south. And he measured its jambs and its vestibule, and they had the same size as the others. Both it and its vestibule had windows all around, like the windows of the others. Its length was 50 cubits, its breadth was 25 cubits, and there were 7 steps leading up to it. Its vestibule was before them. It had palm trees on its jambs, 1 on either side. And there was a gate on the south of the inner court. And he measured from gate to gate toward the south 100 cubits. So the south gate, just like the east gate and the north gate. And there's one thing that probably doesn't hit us at all. Maybe, I'll say it, maybe it does. But there's something that this would directly speak to the exiles. There's a distinction between the chaos that they're living in and the order of what God is saying. Like they would immediately feel this distinction. Well, I don't know that we feel it the same way. I don't know that we recognize the order versus like the chaos of life. But that would be a message. That's a main thing Ezekiel would be communicating to the exiles. Another detail starts to pop up with these two gates. When you enter from the outer courts, when you go through the gates, you go through these walls and the gates, you ascend, you climb 7 steps. Right? We're going to see that, kind of hang on to that climb of 7 steps. We're going to see that in just a minute. Let's move towards the inner court now, verse 28. Then he brought me to the inner court through the south gate, so next concentric area in. Not all the way in, but the next layer. And he measured the south gate. These are the inner gates, right, that lead to the inner courts. It was the same size as the other. Its side rooms, its jambs, its vestibule were the same size as the others, and both it and its vestibule had windows all the way around. Its length was 50 cubits, its breadth was 25 cubits, and there were vestibules all the way around, 25 cubits long and 5 cubits broad. Its vestibule faced the outer court, and the palm trees were on its jambs, and the stairway had 8 steps. So imagine you come in through this wall, you go through this gate, and there's kind of a vestibule, a space, kind of a patio on the outside, and then there's guard rooms all over the place, and there's like kind of an open space, a big open space, and then directly across from the gate that you came in, there's another set of gates, and kind of the patios are facing each other. The vestibules are facing each other, and that one leads up, and so you kind of climb these 7 steps into this space on the other side of the wall, and then way across in the distance is this other place, and when you go through that gate, you climb another 8 steps. And we keep seeing these palm trees on the jambs. We'll get there in a minute. Verse 32. Then he brought me to the inner court on the east side, and he measured the gate. It was of the same size as the others. The side rooms, its jambs, its vestibule were of the same size as the others, and both it and its vestibule had windows all the way around. Its length was 50 cubits, its breadth was 25 cubits. Its vestibule faced the outer court. It had palm trees on its jambs on either side. It had a stairway that had 8 steps, so same as the other, right? Inner gates, inner guard rooms, more vestibules. Then he brought me to the north gate, and he measured the same size as the others. Its side rooms, its jambs, its vestibule were the same size as the others. It had windows all around. Its length was 50 cubits. Its breadth was 25 cubits. So again, same as on the other side. Its vestibule faced the outer court, and it had palm trees on its jambs on either side, and the stairway had 8 steps. So now we climb 8 more steps. We've entered 7 steps as we've gotten into the outer court. Directly across, we see this thing facing. We climb 8 steps to get in now into the inner courts. We're passing these symbolic things like palm trees. We're going from outside to inside. We're going from far from God to near to God. We're going from low to high. We move through gates and stairs. We're progressing inward. Next section, verse 38. There was a chamber with its door in the vestibule of the gate where the burnt offering was to be washed. And in the vestibule of the gate were 2 tables on either side on which the burnt offering and the sin offering and the guilt offering to be slaughtered. And off to the side, on the outside, as one goes up to the entrance of the north gate, were 2 tables. And off to the other side of the vestibule of the gate were 2 tables. So there's tables inside now. Tables for making offerings or offering sacrifices. Verse 41. 4 tables were on either side of the gate, 8 tables on which to slaughter. And there were 4 tables of hewn stone for the burnt offering, 1.5 cubits long and 1.5 cubits broad, 1 cubit high, on which the instruments were laid to which the burnt offerings and the sacrifices were slaughtered. And hooks, a handbreadth long, were fastened all around within. And on the tables the flesh of the offering was to be laid. So inside now, as we move from the outer courts to the inner courts, as we enter the inner courts, as we're drawing ever nearer, we're ascending, we're climbing higher, we're going through these passageways. Inside now, as the inner courts, is all the space, the tables, where the sacrifices would be offered. These were the sacrifices for atonement and forgiveness. These are the places where people would bring their animals that they were going to offer as a sacrifice that were going to be a substitute for them. The sacrificial system was created in the Garden of Sin into human history because God told the people, listen, on the day you sin, you'll surely die. Sin equals death, and that was a main idea for God to keep present in humanity when we sin. Sin equals death. But then God offered a substitute. that they could offer an animal each time, a firstborn, a costly animal to them, a sacrifice, and they would do this as a substitute for their sin. We talked about this a little bit last week with Gog and Magog. At the end of it, the animals get revenge. They get to eat the dead people, right? Remember that one? No. Okay. Thank you. So, right, there's this reversal at the end of Gog and Magog last week, where finally all the animals that were sacrificial animals eat the valley of the dead the dead soldiers in the valley, right? Again, we're back to the sacrificial system, where people are substituting animals for themselves. These are the atonement sacrifices. And it was a constant reminder that sin equals death. Verse 44. On the outside of the inner gateway were two chambers in the inner court. One at the side of the north gate facing south, the other side of the south gate facing north. And he said to me, now again, look at what you see. Ezekiel, listen to what you hear, right? Every time the angel intervenes, he adds detail. And he said to me, verse 45, this chamber that faces south is for the priests who have charge of the temple. And the chamber that faces north is for the priests that have charge of the altar. These are the sons of Zadok, who alone among the sons of Levi may come near to the Lord to minister to him. And he measured the court 100 cubits long and 100 cubits broad, a square, and the altar was in front of the temple. So as he enters in, there's more. Go through the sacrifices that bring you ever nearer, and then he shows them a space where these particular priests, only these particular priests can be. Now we're going to leave that alone. We'll talk about Zadok and these priests next week. The angels kind of, remember, this is one long vision, 9 chapters, can't cover it in one day, though I would try. Can't cover it in one day. Verse 48, and then he brought me to the vestibule of the temple and measured the jambs of the vestibule, 5 cubits on either side, and the breadth of the gate was 14 cubits. And the side walls of the gate were 3 cubits on either side. The length of the vestibule was 20 cubits, and the breadth 12 cubits. And people would go up to it by 10 steps. And there were pillars beside the jambs, one on either side. So now we approach the temple proper. So you've gone from the outside into the outer courts, through another layer to the inner courts. You go through the sacrifices as you draw near more to like the temple proper. You go through the gates, the doors, the vestibules. You ascend the steps, and now it's 10 steps, right? Outer gate, 7 steps. Inner gate, 8 steps. Temple porch, 10 steps. Why do you think these steps keep getting bigger and bigger? The answer is each time you level up signifies greater nearness to the holy presence of God. The closer you get to God, the higher you must ascend in this vision, right? We're going from the world and we're ascending nearer to God. Each phase, each step, each thing draws us nearer and nearer to God in this vision. So point number 2, we'll put this on the screen today. God's way, not ours. God defines the way we approach him. We don't invent our own path to God. Reverence, not casual spirituality, is the right posture before him. If you just leave that up there for a minute for me, John, I'll come back to that in a second. So what do you do to get through these massive walls? There's 10-foot thick, 10-foot tall walls. How do you get through them? Well, gates, right? God has provided these gates. How do you move from the common areas outside, the outer courts, to get to the inner courts, the courts that are inside, that are considered a holy space, not just a space that God has, but a more holy space? Well, there's tables there to offer sacrifices. Let's pause. Let's connect this really quick. So let's put the next slide up for me. This is why Jesus says this in Gospel of John. Truly, truly, I say to you, I'm the door. Some translations translate that gate. I'm the gate. I'm the door. If anyone enters by me, you'll be saved. And then John the Baptist says the next day, he saw Jesus coming toward him and said, behold, the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world. Right? All these things in this vision are actually pointing us closer and closer to Jesus. How do you get through these massive walls that make a distinction between who is not and who is? What is not God's space and what is God's space? The gate. Jesus says, I am the door. I'm the door for the sheep. I'm the ones. And then we get into this kind of this common area and we move to the next thing. We get to a place that inside of that is considered holy. It's considered set apart. This is all God's space, but this is considered holy, What do? We go through that through sacrifice, right? All those animal sacrifices ever did was point to Jesus. Right? Romans says this, that the blood of bulls and goats could never atone for sin. They just pointed us forward to Jesus. Right? So God created humanity and loves humanity, designed us, made us to be worshipers of God. Our design is to be obedient to God. Well, sin entered into human history and severed that, like divorced us from God. So here we are, broken, sinful, corrupted, and no way we can fix it. We're so broken we can't do it. So there's a barrier between a sinful humanity and a holy God, a barrier we can't overcome, like that massive wall that kind of guards between the difference between outside and inside. There's no way. So God provides the gate. Jesus becomes human. The very thing we're celebrating this year, Advent, we celebrate all the time, but the very point of Advent, that God becomes flesh, and he lives the life you and I are called to live, but choose not to, and he does it in our place. And that by dying death, like the offers, the sacrifices on the tables, he pays our penalty. He becomes our substitute. But not a substitute that needs to be done over and over and over again every time you come in, but a once-for-all substitute because he's God in human flesh taking our place. As we draw nearer to God, everything keeps us in Christ. That's why Jesus says this in John 14, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. You don't get through the wall except through the door. You don't get into the inner space except through the sacrifice. You don't get to draw near to God your way. You must do it God's way. God has provided the way. So now we start to get inside the actual temple building itself, and all of these things have been pointing us to what Christ is, to who Christ is, to what Christ has done, to what we need. And it's made a clear distinction, like that's outside, this is inside. And the barrier is insurmountable for us. But these massive gates remind us that through Christ we enter in. And then all these sacrificial tables scattered out there remind us that sin equals death. But Jesus paid our debt with his death. So we move in, verse 1, 41, 1. Then he brought me to the nave and measured the jambs. On each side, the 6 cubits were the breadth of the jambs. And the breadth of the entrance was 10 cubits on the side walls. The entrance were 5 cubits on either side. And he measured the length of the nave, 40 cubits, with its breadth, 20 cubits. Sounds real familiar and kind of sounds the same, but here's what's significant. The nave is actually, if you pull our blueprints for this building, when St. John's Lutheran built this back in the 70s, we bought it from them. On the blueprints, this is the nave. We don't use that term often, but this is the nave. This is the place where people gather to worship. This is the main congregational space. That's what he's talking about. The nave is that central place for congregants. Verse 3. Now there's a shift here. So listen. Verse 3. Then he went into the inner room and measured. He goes from a holy place where people can be. After the sacrifices, after the gates, after the process, there's the place like this where all the people can be. But then there's a place beyond that. That's the Holy of Holies. That's the place where only God can be. Right? And you guys probably know the story. Only God can be in this place, and God's presence would fill it, and they would have the smoke would kind of be coming out of the top, and that God's presence literally existed there behind the veil. And only God could be in there, except for one day a year, the high priest on the Day of Atonement would go through the process from outside to inside with a series of rituals and sacrifices and cleansings and things that washed away sin and brought him near. And then if he had done it right, he could go in there one day a year and make the one sacrifice on the Day of Atonement. And literally had these bells on his robe and his garments. And they had rope tied to him. Because if you stopped hearing the bells, you just pull him out. He was dead. Because going into the space where God is not just something you can do. And so one guy, one day a year, doing it the right way, could enter in and make the sacrifice of atonement for the people. But again, do it wrong, and they pull him out dead. So this is the most holy place. So he went into the inner room and measured. So now the angel can only go in there. Ezekiel has to stay out, because even in his vision, Ezekiel can't go in. He went into the inner room and measured the jambs of the entrance, 2 cubits in the entrance and 6 cubits on the side walls of either side of the entrance, 7 cubits. And he measured the length of the room, 20 cubits in its breadth and 20 cubits across the nave. And he said to me, this is the most holy place. Kids, I gave you 5 questions. I'm going to answer the last 2 out of order, so I'm going to flip them, just so you know. This is where only God's presence could be, not any human being, except for the high priest. So what do the gates, the tables, and the high priest all have in common? They all point us to Jesus. Right? We already discussed kind of the gates and then the sacrifice, the tables, but in Hebrews 4:14 it says this, since then we have a great high priest who passed through the heavens, Jesus, the Son of God. So let us hold fast to our confession. See, Jesus is the fulfillment of each of these things. The New Testament, either in Jesus' words or the apostles' words, connect us to each phase, each gate, each space, each sacrifice, each person, as we draw nearer, point us to Jesus. So point number 3 today. True restoration isn't cosmic or a cosmetic or external, but spiritual. Jesus purifies the heart, reshapes desires, and restores worship from the core of who we are. Jesus, because of his holiness, makes us holy. Makes us holy internally, not just externally. It's not just washing your hands. It's like washing and purifying our hearts. Because he is the fulfillment of these things. These things just pointed to him. These animal sacrifices could never take our place. The places where they would wash and where they would do and the process they would go through just fixed them on the outside. But all of this points us to Jesus, who fixed us on the inside. I want to close with 2 more things, so let's keep reading. Verse 5. Then he measured the wall of the temple, 6 cubits thick, and the breadth of the side chambers, 4 cubits all around the temple. And the side chambers were in 3 stories, one over another, 30 in each story. And there were offsets all around the wall of the temple to serve as supports for the side chambers, so that they should not be supported by the wall of the temple. Verse 7, and it became broader as it wound upward to the side chambers, because the temple was enclosed upward all around the temple. Thus the temple had a broad area upward. And so one went up from the lowest story to the top story through the middle story. So the gates and the spaces for humanity to draw near all keep getting narrower. It says these vestibules get narrow as you go through them. You climb more steps, and the space keeps getting narrow until this one spot where it says, thus the temple had a broad area upward. Because the one place that widens out is the space between the Holy of Holies and God. Right? Our process draws us narrower and nearer until we're there. And then the opening to God, it says, gets broader and broader. Verse 8, I saw also that the temple had a raised platform all around. The foundations of the side chambers measured a full reed of 6 long cubits. The thickness of the outer wall of the side chambers was 5 cubits. The space between the side chambers of the temple and the other chambers was a breadth of 20 cubits all around the temple on every side. And the doors of the side chambers opened with free space, one toward the north, another toward the south. And the breadth of the free space was 5 cubits all around. The building that was facing the separate yard on the west side was 70 cubits broad, and the wall of the building was 5 cubits thick all around, and its length 90 cubits. So the angel finishes measuring all the inside areas of the holy space, all the places where the priest would be, all the way up to the Holy of Holies where only God would be. Now the angel is going to quickly measure the outside, giving us a couple more details. Verse 13, then he measured the temple 100 cubits long, and the yard of the building with its walls 100 cubits long, the breadth of the east front of the temple yard 100 cubits. Then he measured the length of the building facing the yard that was at the back of its galleries on either side 100 cubits. The inside of the nave, and the vestibules and the courts, the thresholds, the narrow windows, all the galleries, all around, the 3 of them, opposite the threshold, were paneled with wood all around, from the floor up to the windows. Now the windows were covered to the space above the door, even to the inner room and on the outside. So some other measurements, some wood paneling, some more windows. These windows are covered. But now listen to this, verse 17. And on the walls all around, inside and outside, was a measured pattern. It was carved of cherubim and palm trees. Cherub is another word for angel. A palm tree between cherub and cherub. And every cherub had two faces. A human face toward the palm tree on one side and the face of a young lion toward the palm tree on the other side. They were carved on the whole temple all around. And from the floor to above the door, cherubim and palm trees were carved. Similarly, the wall of the nave. Last questions for you guys, kids. What are the cherubs and the palm trees all about? This is a look back at the story of the Garden of Eden. Right? The palm trees represent the garden and fruitfulness, and they're showing they're reminding us of the place where God's presence existed. But when sin entered into human history and humanity was removed from the garden, it says that God put an angel, a cherub, on the outside guarding it. Right? That no one could go back in and eat the tree of life and live forever. Because no one wants to live forever in this sinful, jacked up condition. And so fruitfulness is here, and a cherub is here. And inside the holy place, God brings us back to that. God brings us back to the fruitfulness of his presence in his garden. And the angels that guard it, all along making the distinction between what is in and what is out. Skip all the way down, chapter 42, verse 15. Now when he had finished measuring the interior of the temple area, he led me out by the gate that faced east and measured the temple all the way around. He measured the east side with a measuring reed, 500 cubits by the measuring reed all around. He measured the north side, 500 cubits by the measuring reed all around. He measured the south side, 500 cubits by the measuring reed. And he turned to the west side and measured 500 cubits by the measuring reed. He measured on the four sides. It's this last line I want you to hear. And it had a wall all around it, 500 cubits long and 500 cubits broad, to make separation between the holy and the common. There's a massive difference between the common and the holy. There's a distinction between the space that God has not set apart for himself and the space that God has set apart for himself. There's a difference between the people that God has set apart for himself and those who God has not set apart for himself. Or there should be a clear distinction. All of this bringing us to this final point. We'll put this on the screen, God's presence. God shapes our lives into places fit for his presence. He prepares the heart before he pours out his spirit, and Christ is both our model and our means. Remember I will give you a new heart, and I'll put my spirit within you. God has been drawing them in, changing their hearts, making them different, drawing them back, putting them back in the city, now moving them through the wall, through the outer court, through the inner court, into the holy place where God is, into the place where God's restoration and God's Spirit lives. And we, through Christ, get to do that. So what applications will you make today? I'm just going to do two suggestions today. One for all of us who profess to be believers, and then one for if you are not a follower of Jesus yet. For those of us who follow Jesus, how do you prepare yourself to come into the presence of God each time we gather? In light of all these details, which many we skipped over, do you prepare yourself for God in a way that honors his holiness? And if you're not a follower of Jesus yet, the walls are big between the world and the presence of God. But there is a gate. His name is Jesus. If you don't know him personally, we would love to tell you more. What did you hear today you want to apply to your life this week? Let's find some folks around you, and let's share our takeaways for the week with them. Members, if you find somebody sitting around you that's new, please talk with them.